All right, good morning. This is Jeff Scott. It is Wednesday, the 15th of February. We currently have no one on with us, which is okay. But I'm going to today go over chapters 11, 12, and probably 13 from the Murach text. If we get all of those done tomorrow, or today rather, then tomorrow we'll go over chapters 14 and 15 of the Murach text. And I should be able to do all the presentations ideally in about 2 to 2.5 hours. That'll mean that you have at least an hour to an hour and a half to work on things. All right, good morning, Grant. I was just saying that today we're going to go over at least chapters 11 and 12, and it's very short, so probably 11, 12, and 13. And I still would like to finish between 10 and 10:30, so you have an hour and a half or so to start on the exercises. And then the same thing tomorrow. The chapters tomorrow, chapter 12, which I believe is on tables, I don't remember, but or chapter 14 rather, is chapter 14 is on audio and video, and it's a very, very short chapter. And chapter 15 is on CSS transformations and the like. All right, Friday will be our usual lab day. Please remember that all of your chapter 10 work will be due this Sunday, and then all the work that we're going to be doing now in the next few days will be due a week from Sunday. All right, so with that said, let's get started. And I've mentioned this already, but so far we've gone over the first two sections of the book. So you learn the essential concepts and skills, and we've spent quite a bit of time on responsive web design. Now we're moving into additional skills. So again, the plan today is to talk about images, icons, and fonts, then tables, then forms. If we get all that done, then tomorrow audio, video, and CSS transitions, transforms, and animations. What I'm going to try to do by Friday of this week is to give you some kind of a pretest. I don't know what it will be. All right. And then I would let you work on it all day Monday. I would go over it on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, we would have a test on chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And Thursday, I would finish up the book by going over chapters 16, 17, and 18. And I think I mentioned this before. I know I did yesterday, in fact. And that is for chapters 16, 17, and 18 that you can see right here. I'm not going to assign any homework. I'm not going to assign any labs. I'm not going to assign any written tests. I'm just going to go over, especially 16 and 17 fairly quickly, and that'll give us a chance to transition into chapter 18. All right. So what I'm saying is by the end of next week, ideally at least, we'll be done with the current book we're working with. Then the week after that, which is, like the 27th or something like that. So that'll get us into March. We'll spend 1 to 2 weeks going over Bootstrap 5. All right, we're going to jump into it head first right away and create a website fairly quickly, just so you can see how you work with it. And then after that, for the rest of the semester, we'll be working with a JavaScript book. All right, so with that said, let's just jump right into section 3. So they mention here that, again, chapter 11 will be images and fonts. Chapter 12 will be tables and tabular data. And chapter 13 will be all about forms. Okay. Now there will be some new stuff in here, and there also may be some stuff in here that I've kind of gone over and glossed over before because I knew that it was coming up later in the book. I mean, like they'll talk in here about Google Fonts, and I've mentioned Google Fonts to you before. All right, but we'll actually take more of a look at them right now. And there are other fonts that you can download in addition to Google Fonts as well. So we'll talk about images, and as you can see, that's the majority of the chapter here. And then we will end up the last few pages talking about fonts. All right. We've talked about images, and we've talked a lot about images, whether you think we have or not this semester. And what they show right here in this table that's on page 365 are the 5 basic image types. Let me just tell you that for years, there were just the top three. It started out with just the one and the second one, and that was GIF files. The thing about GIF files is, as you can see there, they only represent 256 colors, and they're good for things like very simple logos, like where they show that here. Those are good for GIFs. But you can see the quality really isn't that good. All right. And they're very limited to what you can do. All right. And then after that really came PNGs and JPEGs. And JPEG is like Joint Photographic Export Group or something like that. And PNG is Portable Network Graphics. So again, those were the ones that came afterwards. Well, Google has gotten into it fairly recently with their WebP files. All right. And as it says, a leading edge format developed by the Alliance for Open Media is these AVIF or AVIF type of files. And what's amazing about these, when you look at it, notice it says it supports up to 68 billion colors. The lossy and the lossless formats, what they're talking about there is when you take an image and you save it, all right, and you start changing the size, etc. Sometimes what can happen is if you've got two colors that are very close to one another, they can kind of bleed into one another, and you lose some of the quality of the pictures with that. And again, we'll talk about this in just a moment. All right. And as always, again, I'm not going to spend much time talking about what's here. All right. I'm just going to give you my take. It's here. All right. So if you want more, again, I just gave you my little take, so to speak, on JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, WebP, and these AVIF type of files. All right. Okay, well, you know how to include an image on a page, and we've talked about this many times. You've done this for quite a bit of time. You know that the only two things for an image that are required on a page are the source attribute, which is the URL for where the image is located, and an alt tag, which you put in there. Again, it's considered required today. And as we talked about before, you add the alt tag for two reasons. First, if for some reason the image isn't available, you give it a wrong path, the image has been moved, you spell the image name wrong or whatever, it gives a message so that the user knows at least what the image was supposed to be. And the second reason that you put the alt tag in there is for browsers for the blind or visually impaired, so that they've got something that they can read to the person who's looking at the website. I would never, ever recommend that when you bring an image in, that you add a height and width directly like this. I would never recommend that you do that. All right. And it's very easy when you do that to screw it up. And when I say screw it up, you also can skew the way that the image looks. All right. And again, we've talked about this kind of thing before. You can go in with CSS and you can play with height and you can play with width and you can see what they've done there. All right. I would never recommend that you do that. And I know I've shown you this before, but if I go out here and I'm just going to go out to images.google.com and, again, whoops, try that again. All right, I'm just going to put in here again, dogs, and I'm going to grab a picture of a dog, this one right here. In fact, I've used this one before. So if I go in here, the first thing to realize is I don't have to save the image. I can come in here and I can save the image, and it says, where do you want to save it? So I'm going to go to my desktop here, and I'm going to say dog.jpg. All right, but if I don't want to do that, I can also go in and right mouse click and copy the image address, and I can do that. Now, if you do plan on making changes to the image, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. And if you do plan on making changes to the image, all right, here's the dog right here. Okay, so I'm going to open that up, right? Open it up with Paint. And as you can see when I do this, if I click on resize and I go over to pixels, it saved it as a 275 by 188 image. Let's say I wanted to double the size that it is. Well, then I could come up to I usually come up here, all right, to the horizontal, and I'll just type in 550. And the other one scales automatically when you do that, all right? As long as this is checked. And if it's not checked, you can make it look any way you want it to look. Well, like this, that doesn't look bad. It still looks like it's got pretty much quality. When you make it too big, of course, it's going to look a little bit weird, or it could. The other thing you got to be careful of, because I've seen people do this, they go to pixels here, and then they uncheck this, and then they take this one and maybe put in 900. And then you start getting really skewed looking pictures. So if you are going to come in and you are going to change this, I would recommend that you go to resize, you use pixels, and you always have this thing checked in here. I think this was like 550 or something like that. All right, maybe that doesn't even look right, but you get the idea, hopefully. All right. So again, as it says, always call the alt attribute. We've talked about this before. If you do have an image that's used for decoration, okay, so for instance, some people might take, well, what we looked at on the other page where you had the logo, and they might just code the alt tag as an empty string. All right. Now, if the logo is an important part of it, maybe you wouldn't want to do that. But, if it is just a decorative image, maybe you've got like a flower or something that you're putting out there, then it's up to you. All right. As it says, use the height and width attributes of the image tag only to specify the size of an existing image. All right, then the browser can reserve the right amount of space. And it's very rare that I do a lot of work like within the CSS like this. Like I told you, I like to go in through Paint and do it. Not everybody agrees with that. All right. All right. As far as aligning images, and it may not look like a big thing, but when you look right here, there is a difference between these two pictures that are shown on the page here. On the pictures on the left, the text is aligned with the bottom of the image. And on the examples on the right, the text is aligned with the center of the image. All right. Is it that important? It depends on what you're looking for. And again, I have worked with clients, and with some of the stuff that they want, you're like, why the heck would you want this? But you know what? You're paying the bills for me. So if that's what you say you want, that's fine. Then that's what I'm going to give you. All right. So as they say here, okay, they talk about some kind of alignments here. So as it says, a relative or absolute value or a keyword that determines the vertical alignment of the image. And these are the different ways that you can align it. All right. And a lot of times what it is, when you look at it, you now know that maybe, as an example, maybe not a good example, but maybe on a bigger screen you want this, and maybe on a smaller screen you want this. Well, one thing now is how you can go in and you can use media queries to do that. All right. If for some reason that's what the client would want. All right. Floats, they never really go away. All right. We've talked about using grid, and we've talked about using Flexbox, but sometimes it is simple to go and float an image. We've talked about this kind of thing before. So you can see that right here, we floated the image to the left and the text floats around it. And you can also tell that when we come down to this last paragraph here, we've cleared it. All right, because if we didn't clear it, it would basically try to put it like over there or whatever. Okay, and it says you can use the same techniques rather to float an image, the same ones that we used for non-image elements or block elements as they call them. All right. Now, one of the things that came with HTML5 is there are some new basically elements that you can use when you are creating an image. And those two are Fig and Fig Caption. All right. So here, as it says, here's a page that uses a figure and the fig caption elements. Well, what are they here? Well, if you look, you've got the, all right, then underneath it, you've got the fig caption, all right, which says Scott Sampson and friend, and there it is. Now, do you have to do this? All right, the answer is, of course, no. But remember that one of the things that we've been trying to go over in here is when you create new websites, they should be semantic in nature. That's what HTML5 is all about. And semantic basically means that the tags have meaning. When we use, when back in the day, when everything we used were div tags by themselves don't have meaning. And a lot of people use div tags and gave really bad names for their classes and for their IDs. They made sense to them, but then later, if somebody ended up taking over for them, they didn't make a lot of sense. So you've got now, you've got nav and you've got header and you've got footer and article and aside and section, etc. Well, figure and fig caption are two more things that you can add to the list. All right. It would have been totally fine here to just put the image in the way that it's shown there without a figure tag. And rather than a fig caption, you could have just put a paragraph underneath there. But again, this is considered to be more semantically correct, is to create this figure and this fig caption. Plus, as it says there, it's a lot easier to come in here when you do this and use your CSS on it. All right. It is optional, they mentioned. When coded, it can be anywhere within the figure element. You could run it along the sides, you could put it along the top as well. All right, image rollovers. Let me just say that there are different ways of doing image rollovers. The way that they show right here, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. All right, but it's not as interactive, so to speak, as doing image rollovers that we'll learn later when we talk about doing image rollovers with JavaScript. All they're talking about doing here, when you look right here, and I'm going to come back to this, but what they're saying is this is image one. All right. When you hover over image one, what we want is we want the image to change from image one or H1 to image two or H2. So if you take your mouse and you roll over the image, it'll change. If you get out again, it'll go back to the original one. All right. Where is this used? Well, this may or may not have been a great example, but the one I always look at is, for example, if you've ever done this, if you've ever gone out to a site that like a Nutrisystem or a Weight Watchers, where they show before and after pictures of people. All right. And a lot of times they'll show the before picture, you put your mouse on there, and then they'll show the after picture type of thing. And again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing it this way. And it says this image has been rolled over because the mouse is hovering over it. All right. So again, it is the hover property. And just like we've used hover, basically the way we've used hover so far is we've used hover when you're hovering over a link that's in a navigation bar. Well, the idea here is the same, but rather than hovering over a link, we're hovering over an image. As it says here, it's an image that gets changed when the mouse hovers over it. All right. And this is, like I said, this is one way of doing it. Image maps are kind of cool. I looked yesterday. I had created one years ago, and I guess that it was so long ago that I don't have it on my system anymore. But I made one years ago, and let me just show you. I don't have it, like I said, but I want to show you what it was. All right. Uh, it was this. It was a picture of Mount Rushmore. It was actually let me get a bigger picture here. Oh, there we go. There we are. All right. So it was here. And what I did was I set it up so that if you click basically anywhere in here, it would bring up information about Mount Rushmore. That's not surprising. But if you clicked here, and I basically kind of drew a square around Washington's head, all right, you got to the president of Washington. If you clicked in here, you went to the presidential page for Jefferson. Here, the presidential page for Roosevelt, and here, the presidential page for Lincoln. All right. And maybe you've seen, not even like that, but if you've seen this, all right, where somebody comes up and you basically set up an image map here. So for instance, if I clicked right here, it would give me the state page for Missouri. If I clicked here, it would give me the state page for Arkansas, etc. So the idea then behind using an image map, all right, the idea behind using it is it's basically it's going to be typically some kind of an image, all right, and it's going to have certain parts on it. And when you click on those certain parts, you can go out and open additional pages. I've seen really kind of neat image maps for medical students where they'll show like a human body and you can click on different places that's on the human body and you can find out, like if you clicked on the knee, if you want to find out about MCL or ACL injuries, that kind of thing. When you do this, believe it or not, probably the most important part of this is down here where they show the shape. Notice it says the possible keywords are rectangle, where you can make a rectangle or a circular shape, circle, all right, poly. Poly is the different one because with poly, you're kind of the artist, all right, and you can kind of draw it a little bit better. I know that when I created that one, I didn't use poly. I'm just not that talented to be able to kind of trace around somebody's head. All right. But when you set that up, basically what'll happen when you set the shape up and you come in there, that if you put your mouse in there, there are coordinates that are going to be set. There are XY coordinates. All right. That'll be set. And like I said, I gave you a couple of examples. There are many examples out there of this. All right. And here it says for href, a relative or absolute URL that identifies the page that will be displayed when an area is clicked. And remember that if you use the states, like I mentioned, or the human body, all right, you could have not just a URL, you could have a whole range of URLs. All right. How to use the image and the picture elements. This is kind of neat stuff in here, because they bring in a new element that we've never looked at before, and that is source set. And it says the URL of one or more images, each followed optionally by a space and an image width. So when you look in here, they're setting up between source set and size. Okay, what they're saying is if the minimum width is 1200 pixels, we want to use the large ping. If the minimum width is between 800 pixels and 1199, we want to use the medium one. And if it's, if it's between usually 100 and, maybe 600, 1 and 600, we're going to use the small one. All right. And it's not that this is relatively new. This has been around for a while. But with some of the stuff that I've shown you, as far as, we could go in and using that dog picture I showed you before, we could make a small one. Then we could double it or triple it and make a medium one, and then double that and make a large one if we wanted to. All right. As an example, we could make several of them and then use it like this. All right. What you find rather than that, what a lot of people end up doing is they just set the max width for the image. All right. The width and the max width, they set them both to 100%, and they basically let the browser try to scale it. All right. Usually, not always, but usually that works pretty well. All right. But you can use this. And as they mentioned here, there's even more stuff that you can use. All right. So notice element for adding multiple image resources. There's a picture element that you can use. All right. So there's different ways that this can be done. So here we've got the same kind of thing. All right, but it's using source, and up here it's using source set and sizes, and down here it's using source and source set. All I'm trying to tell you is there are a multiple number of ways that you can show this, and you can set up having images of different sizes, in addition to kind of the way we've been doing it. And again, you might say, well, is this really that important? The answer is, believe it or not, yes. Because if your job, if you're working for a company, or if you are a freelancer and you are creating a website for a user and they're paying for it, you want to make sure that using every single kind of medium towards, our standards, our phone, our tablet, our desktop, our laptop, etc. All right, that we have the greatest user experience possible. All right, that when somebody looks at it, regardless of what they're using to look at it, that it looks professional. All right, these are kind of neat. SVGs, scalable vector graphics. The reason that SVGs are neat is they automatically scale. All right, and there are good things and bad things about this. All right, it says one drawback of using SVGs is that SVG images are hard to create unless you have a background in graphics design. What does that mean? That means this is one of the times where when you look at this, you have to have some kind of an understanding of math. All right, which turns a lot of people off to begin with. But look at those benefits. They load faster. They're scalable. They automatically scale, so they work well with RWD. All right. And as it says, they're recognized by Google, so they don't affect search engine optimization. The bad news, as it says there, without a background in this, they can be hard to create. There are some tools that will help you go in and create SVGs. All right. And as it says, they're not, if you've got very intricate images like photographs, they don't work well. Something like this, yeah, would work great. All right. Okay, how to get the images and icons that you need. First, let's talk about the bad. All right, I'm just going to go out, and it doesn't mean anything, but I'm going to go out to CNN. All right, and that's what we have here on CNN. So let's suppose for a second that I'm searching through here, and I think, I don't know, I like this picture. Okay, I'm going to be going to work for doing something for a shoe company, and I like that picture. All right. That doesn't mean that I can just go in there and do this. So I can right mouse click on it, choose save image as. I mean, I can literally do this, and I'll put it here, shoes. Okay. Now when I go out here, there's the shoes. Right? And from what I've just shown you, I could come in here and it's 300 by something or other. And I'm just going to make this, I don't know, let's make it 900. Okay, and there's the shoes. All right, that doesn't mean that I can just use those and plop them in a website. Now, for what we're doing, for what we are doing, in other words, if you're doing something in the educational realm, it's usually going to be okay to do something like this. All right. But I would never recommend going out to a commercial site and grabbing anything from there and using it, even in your own websites. I would never recommend it. All right. There can be issues. You know, I've told this story before that years ago, this is not a joke. It was, well, at least it was online, and I read it in the newspaper as well. There was a gentleman in Arizona who had a dry cleaning shop. And this is, again, I'm not making this up. His last name was McDonald. So what he did above his sign on the outside is he put arches. And they said within 24 hours, he was served with a cease and desist order by McDonald's. All right, the food company. And that's why people think, well, I can do this. There won't be any ramifications. There very well could be ramifications. So you don't want to do that. All right. Now, with this, when to use an image editor, I have shown you a little bit using Paint. There are other image editors that you can use, and many of them, all right, are better than Paint because they offer you the chance to do things that you cannot do with Paint. All right. The free one that I've used before is GIMP, GIMP. All right. There's also things, as it says, like Adobe Photoshop CC. That's the standard, but you pay for it. There's Adobe Photoshop Elements. It says an inexpensive editor. You know what? I don't care if it's 10 bucks. 10 bucks is 10 bucks. All right. But one of the things that it allows you to do is it's shown in the example here that it's darn near impossible when you're working with just Paint to take something like this and make it into something like this. In other words, to get rid of the transparent, make it transparent. All right. But again, like I said, there are tools that you can use for this stuff. GIMP is not a bad one. All right. So it says if an image with transparency is displayed over a colored background, the background color will show through. All right. So how to get images. You know what? I've shown you some of the best ones, and those include Pexels, PEXELS.com. And I've also mentioned that when you go there and you grab them, so let's say I wanted this one right here. All right. And it's a free download. So let's say I want it and I want it in the medium size here. And I click on that and then I click download. Quite often you're going to see this. You can donate. That's always, of course, your call. But here, this photo by Edward Ayer, okay, this is a nice thing for you to put in the alt tag. So you could have photo of young people in love by Edward Ayer, Pexels.com. All right, you're giving them some attribution. You are encouraging these people to keep doing what they're doing, and that is putting out free content that you can use. All right. I should mention too, if you look at this, because we don't talk about this in this class at all, but it says Canva, edit photos effortlessly for free. Canva is a really neat tool. You can do a lot of stuff rather than just working with editors. You can set up entire websites with Canva. All right. Another one that I mentioned is unsplash.com, and it works pretty much the same way that Pexels does. So a lot of times when I'm looking for something, all right, I'll go and look in one, and if I can't find what I want, I will look in the other. And in here, they're going to mention some other ones, but the first thing they do in here is they talk about Creative Commons license. And when you look right here, these are the 4 steps. All right. The first one says attribution. And as it says, you can use it. It's kind of what I just showed you. You can use the images as long as you give credit as requested. They don't even have that in Pexels and Unsplash. They encourage attribution. But if you don't, all right, nobody's going to come after you. Share alike, as it says, you can distribute the image based on the license that governs the original work. And I've given this example before. This is many, many years ago when I started teaching this stuff, and websites were much more crude than they are right now. I remember looking at a website. It was for some car place. And what happened was they had these flames that were kind of shooting out of the car, and they looked really cool. I thought that's kind of cool. I mean, at the time it was. And I remember within a week, I saw it on 2 or 3 other similar websites. And my guess is people just saw it, thought it was cool, and grabbed it. All right. It's much harder to do that today. There's non-commercial where it says you can use the image and images derived from it for non-commercial purposes only. That's kind of what we're doing. All right. But if you were to take and grab an image from a site where it wasn't free, and you put it on your own site, and later that site goes live, and it's possible for you to earn some money from that site, you can get in trouble then. All right. At a minimum, if you wish to use content that is on somebody else's site, at a minimum, you should send them an email asking for permission. If you get the permission returned to you in another email, all right, then what you should do is you should make sure you save a copy of that email. There's a lot of companies, rather than doing that, they've got kind of a stock letter that if they want to use something, they will fill in the guts, so to speak, send it out to a place, all right, and then wait for permission to use that. All right. And then there's, as it says, no derivative works as well. So here's some other places. Okay, and these are places in here that I haven't even mentioned. All right, I use, but there's all sorts of places that you can use. All right. All right, icons and favicons. I want to mention a couple things about this. First of all, fontawesome.io. Oh, maybe it's changed since then, so let's do it like this. There it is. So it is fontawesome.com now. That is not it, I don't think. Well, maybe it is it. It changes a lot, so this looks a lot different than the last time I was out here. All right, but the thing about Font Awesome is it's got a listing somewhere in here. Let's see, icons. All right, it says that there's 22,643 icons. That's the good news. The bad news is about 20,000 plus of those are not free. So if you go out and you look at these, what's usually going to happen, not always, but what's usually going to happen is either they'll show the free ones first, all right, or there's a way for you to come in here and ferret these. So somewhere in here, and again, I don't remember how to do this, but you can go in here and you can search what the way this used to be set up is they would show you a bunch of these, just like they are right here. And about every maybe 4 out of 7 were grayed out. And what that meant was those were available, but not for free. All right. But they're really nice. So if I click over here on free, okay, there you go, 2020 icons. So we can use these. We can grab these and bring them in. In fact, I've done this before. I've shown you this. So if I want this shopping cart, I can click on this, and you'll notice that what I have to do to bring it in is this right here. All right. It's brought in basically as an image. The class is FA for Font Awesome -solid -FA fontawesome.cart.shopping. All right. And also, and they may or may not have it for the one I chose, but they usually have a 1X, a 2X, and a 3X. And usually the bigger the number, the bigger the image is. All right. And that's basically, in order to do that, in order to use this, and I have mentioned this before, you want to go out to cdnjs.com. CDN for Content Delivery Network, cdnjs.com. And that brings you here. All right. And then you come in here and you type in Font Awesome. All right. And there it is. If you don't want to do that, you can go out to the Font Awesome website I just showed you and register. All right. And then there's some song and dance that they make you go through to do it. Some people would rather do that. I just as soon do this. Click the middle one that says copy link tag. And then basically what that does is just bring it up in here. Is it's going to make something like this. All right. And what you care about, basically, for lack of better words, is this part. All right. And that is telling you that you are using Cloudflare, which is a content delivery network, and you are going out and you are grabbing the latest version of Font Awesome, and you're bringing it in to your site. You would take this particular thing. I'd keep the integrity in there. the cross origin, etc. But I'm showing you the major part of it. I'd still bring in all of it. All right. And put that either above or below the link to your own CSS file. All right. By doing that, you are able then to go in and use Font Awesome. All right. Now that's the good news. Now, in a little bit of time, like I said, in a week or so, maybe in a couple weeks, we're going to be going into Bootstrap, which is all under getbootstrap.com. All right. The reason I'm showing you this is if I come in here, and someplace in here there should be. Well, let's do it like this. All right. They have changed Bootstrap, and now Bootstrap comes with its own icons. Now, you may look at these and say, oh, I like the ones for Font Awesome better. You can still use them. But the point is, Bootstrap now has several hundred icons that you can use as well. So here's their shopping cart. All right. And you're going to notice when you look at them, that looks very similar, but it's not FA anymore. All right. It's BI for, I think, Bootstrap icon. Okay. So they show you some examples in here. And in this example, these are all Font Awesome icons. All right. So in the LI tag, they've got the icon followed by the verbiage, icon, verbiage, etc. Okay. All right. Favicons. I've a bit about favicons. Let's just assume for a second. Let's go back to which was this one here. This one right here we looked at before. That's those shoes. So let's say, and that is, looks like Hoka, Hoka. So let's say I wanted to make that into a favicon. All right. Maybe it will, maybe it's not going to look that good, but I just want you to see this. I always type in when I'm looking for something like this, free online favicon. All right. So there's a free online favicon generator. And first one, you know what? It's first, so typically it is pretty good. So the best favicon generator completely free, favicon.io. So I click on that. And what do I want? Well, it's either going to be a ping or it's a JPEG, and it works for either one, I believe. But I'm going to click on this. And then it says to what? I want to bring in a file. So I'm going to download, not download. Yeah, and download. I'm going to go in here, and under my desktop, there's shoes. All right, so there it is. So I brought it in. All right, so drag and drop. I don't remember with this one how it works. So let's try it like this. I'm going to click on this and drag it in here and let go. There it is. All right, now it says next, copy the following links. All right, I'm just going to click the download right here. I don't think I have to. I think I already did. And it probably already created it for me. So if I click copy, all right, I can go over and grab it. All right. Like I said, maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't remember. But the point is, it is pretty darn simple. All right. Be careful, like here where it says click start, that may or may not be what you want. A lot of times when you click these things, what it does is it'll download other stuff onto your machines. So it says use the download button to download the files listed. Okay, we did that. Place the files in the root directory. So it should have made all of these files for us. All right. The point is somewhere on here now I've got a favicon. And you know what those favicons are. That's these things that are up here. It's the image that are up here. All right. And it's not mandatory that you even create one, but most of the time people do. All right. We're right near the end of the chapter here. So let's quickly here talk a little bit about fonts. And it says here, for years, web designers were frustrated by the limited number of fonts. It's not even so much a case of frustration as it is that all of them look the same. I mean, you can only have so much Arial, Helvetica, etc., as they're saying here. All right. So things like Google Fonts became available. All right. And what's really nice about something like a Google font rather, is there's not a whole heck of a lot of stuff you have to do. You bring it in, and then it's going to be available to anybody who looks at it. There's other things that you can do. You can bring in other kinds of fonts. And as it says, you can copy the file for the font family in. Then in the CSS, you can code a style rule for the font face, etc. That's a lot of work. All right. So most people instead use Google or Adobe Web Fonts. I'm not a big fan of the Adobe just because Google gives me virtually everything I need. I've shown you this before, but if I go out to fonts.google.com like this, it now says that there are 1,482 different fonts in here. And you can almost always find what you're looking for. And it's funny, a lot of people choose Roboto. I think they do because it's first. All right, so you just basically you click on it, and when you do, you can start. There's different things that you can do here. What do I mean? All right, notice there's a link and there is an import. If you click import, you can usually put that at the top of the page. But notice since it's in style tags, most people don't do it that way. Most people come in here and they do this and they copy the entire link tag and they put that again somewhere either above or below the link to their style sheet. All right. Then when they want to use it, they just come in and they set the font family to this. All right. And that's really all that you have to do. Now, when you choose this, what you'll notice is they usually have, now notice there's 100, 100 italic. There's light 300 italic. And these go all the way up to 900. You can select all of them. You can select some of them. If you think to yourself, you know what, I like this regular here, this one, and I like, I don't know, this one. Now you've modified it right here to only add those two. So those are the ones that are going to be used all the time. Usually what people do is they just bring in all of them. And I shouldn't even say usually. A lot of times that's what people do. They just download the entire family. All right. Now, there's also a thing in here, and I don't remember where it is, but you can go in and you can find fonts that work well together. Why is that important? Because a lot of times people like to have one font type for headings and another font type for, quote, regular text, unquote. So you can go in and you can check different things to see, when you look in here as far as what goes with what, etc. You're not limited to one of these. You could literally use any of them you want. All right, or as many of them as you want to. And they go through the steps in here in much more depth and breadth of coverage than I did. And if I confused you or you still don't get it or whatever, W3 Schools has got a great thing in here where they walk you through using all of it. All right. Okay, as it says, now that you've finished this chapter, you should have all the HTML and CSS need to work with images. All right, let's jump right into the next chapter, which is very, very, very short. In fact, before we do that, but before we do that, let's take a quick look and see what you're going to have to do for chapter 11 in here for both the Halloween Superstore and for Shape Up. All right, so there's 10 that we just did, and here's 11. So you're creating a product page. In this exercise, you'll create a product page that includes a wide variety of features for working with images. When you're through, it should look like this. I believe you're given all the images. All right. So again, it says to create this page, you can copy the index.html file we used, later and rename it cat, and they walk through the steps. If you follow the steps that are in here, it's really not difficult, okay? All right, so that's what you're gonna have to do in here. And again, for the shape up, you're gonna be doing something that's gonna be similar to that. So create a stress tips page and icons. So you're gonna bring this in, okay? You're gonna bring in these images. Right? I'm gonna ask that you at least attempt to do those by yourselves. All right. So let's quickly go through and start looking at this. What I'm going to do in here is let's quickly come in and create I'm going to create a folder here that I'm just going to call junk. So I'll remember to get rid of it later. And in my junk folder, I am going to open it with code. All right, you've seen this multiple times, nothing new here. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make an index.html file. And let's also come in and make a CSS folder. And in the CSS folder, let's make a styles.css file. All right, so let's start by going into the index file, putting in our exclamation point, etc. And we're going to call this tables example. All right, now I'm going to come in here and I am going to create this and we're going to modify it as we go on. But to keep it, I'm going to keep it simple to begin with. So I'm going to put in here table. Tables are made up of table rows. And typically you have table headings at the top. So I'm going to put in here first name. And another table heading in here that's going to say last name. In fact, let's just do it like this. We'll say middle name. And we'll have one more in here that will say, last name. All right. Now, if I save this and I look at it right now, it sure isn't going to look like much. There it is. First name, middle name, last name. Not much. The first thing I can do to try to make it look at least a little bit better is I'm going to say here, border equal 1. All right. Now, that's not going to do a heck of a lot, but I'm going to save it just to show you that that looks a little better and it's starting to look a little bit more like a table. All right. So when you create tables, again, they're going to be made up of rows. All right. And I'll put in here Jeffrey. Oops. And those rows are going to be made up of data. All right. So put in me. All right. I'm just going to put in 3 rows here. All right. So there's me, there's my wife, and there's my oldest daughter. So if I do that and I save and I bring it in here and I open it, you can see, hopefully at least, it's looking like a table. Now, a few things about this. All right. First of all, we've told it basically to use as little space as possible. All right. So you can see, you may or may not be able to tell, but middle name, this particular right here, this particular column is wider than this column, and it's because of the heading that was put in there. All right. Also, since everything that's in here is text, it's automatically left. If I were to come back in here and do this, so let's go and add one more heading. All right. And for each one of these, we'll put in a salary. Let's just put in, I don't know, 100,000. I like that. And we'll put it in like this. All right. And we'll add one for each one of these, but we will change the number. So let's make this one 75, and we'll make this one 250. And on this one, we'll put in 0.00 as well. So now if I do come in and save this, all right, and I open it with live server, oops, I guess I screwed that up, but I'm wondering if it's because I put the $sign in there. Let me get rid of the $sign. I'm going to just put them in as raw numbers. All right. Because normally what happens is with numbers, they're right justified. Kind of hard to tell in here, and it does look like they're left justified. But this is what we're going to go over. All right, as far as talking about tables. I notice it's 9:02, so let's break till 9:15. When we get done, we're probably by 9:30, we're going to finish with this chapter, and I'm going to jump right in to the next chapter, chapter 13 on forms. So let's take a break right now till 9:15, please. All right, it is 9:15, so let's start back up again. And I like the first sentence in here that says, at one time, tables were used to lay out pages. In fact, many people will tell you that pretty much I don't know, maybe the 90s or so, that tables were used for almost everything. Anytime you needed to have something centered, all right, tables or tables within tables or tables within tables within tables, etc. Says now the right way to do this is to use CSS. So tables should only be used, as it says here, for tabular data, for nothing else. They're still a little bit overused today, but not as much as they used to be. So we'll get the basic skills, HTML skills, followed by the basic CSS skills, and then a few additional things. And again, my guess is this will take somewhere around 10 minutes or so to go over. So when we look in here, and again, I'm not sure why, I guess they probably have done a little bit of formatting in here, but you'll notice they have books, and that's left justified. They have the year published, which they centered, and they have the sales, which are right justified. Not only that, the data is left justified, center justified, and right justified, and so are the corresponding headings. So as you can see in here, and I didn't even put a caption in on the one that I showed you. All right. But what we have in here are the headers. So that's a row of THs. We've got the body, which is 4 rows, all right, of TDs. And then we've got a footer on the bottom. Now, the one that you'll see in here that's probably used the least often is the footer. All right, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But as it says, the table consists of rows and columns. The intersection of a row and column is called a cell, very similar to the way that a spreadsheet is set up. You can have things span. In other words, if I wanted to, let's say in the example that I showed you, the one that I just did, wherever the heck that one was, this one here, that if we wanted to, I could have, instead of having this set up like this, I could have had one heading that spanned all 3 columns by using a col span in there. All right. And I could name and it would have just been 1. All right. You can also do a row span that takes up more than 1 row. All right. You're going to see some examples, I believe, in here at least, of some of that stuff. Now, as far as creating a table, I wanted to mention something that's in here. What they're showing in here is just fine. That said, all right, you can look at it. You can notice they have class left and a bunch of other stuff. That's not really important in here because you can add CSS to the table itself, to 1 or more table rows, to 1 or more table headings, to 1 or more things of table data. All right. But what they have shown in here, and you're going to see this at the end of the chapter, is this is not set up as an ADA type of table. All right. So this would be very hard for somebody to have it read to them by a reader for the blind or the reader for the visually impaired. It's not that you couldn't do it. All right. But they'll talk a little bit later about better ways of doing it. So again, as you can see in the chart, the table tag defines the table. TR is table row, TH is table header, and TD is table data. Not really any surprises here. So something like that is going to give you something like this. All right. As it says, by default, the width is determined automatically based on its content. All right. In the case of the one I did, it was based on the headings because that was the biggest content typically. All right. But in here, notice that the width is all based on the name of the book, and the widest one is JavaScript and jQuery. All right. The year published, same kind of thing, but it's based in here If we had just said year, it would have been almost perfectly symmetrical then. And then we've got our sales. All right. By default, as it says, the table headings are bold-faced. And it says in here that they're centered. Okay, I'll take their word for it. And that by default, the TD element table data is left justified. Now, typically what you do in here is you add a header and you add a footer. All right. Now that's a T head and a T foot. Okay. Now, when you look at this and you look at the example that's right here, and then you go in and you look at the example that's right here, they don't look any different. All right. But the idea again is you are using these semantic tags to bring order to this. You are basically delimiting, all right, where the heading starts and ends. You are delimiting where the body starts and ends, and you are delimiting where the footer starts and ends. And it used to be very interesting. They've changed this over the years, but it used to be that after the table heading in your HTML code, you had to immediately put the footer after it, then the body, even though the body would show before the footer. And I don't know why that was. And it was years ago that you had to do that. But again, it's a natural grouping that you're doing in here. It doesn't make it look any different. But as it says, it can make it easier to style using the CSS, because then you can apply the styling, all right, typically, for example, to the T head, the T body, or the T foot. It says here you can code them in any sequence. The header will always be displayed first, and the footer will always be displayed last. Again, it used to be that it had to be T head, then T foot, then T body, but now it says it doesn't matter. All right. So that's fine. But then when you want to come in and start formatting it, it's pretty much, using the stuff that we've talked about. There's not a lot of new stuff in here. All right. Now, looking at this from the top, you can say, well, you're wrong. But look at what it says here. It's got border collapse. It says a keyword that determines whether space exists between the borders of adjacent cells, or if the borders are collapsed to a single border in between cells. The default is to separate, all right? And you can see the difference without collapsed borders and with collapsed borders, all right? In other words, in here, when you look at the ones here with the collapsed borders, there's just a single line between here, and there's a single line between here. But here, since each one of these are in their own cell, it's as though there's a line up at the top and bottom, a double line almost, all right, from the previous one and from the current one type of thing. So most of the time when you set it up, you'll want to set it up with collapse by saying border collapse, collapse. All right. The other stuff that's in there, again, you can set up the space between cells when the borders are not collapsed. All right. Padding, you already know what that is. Text align, you know what that is. Vertical align is kind of a neat one because it's basically where in the cell you want something to go. And I believe it is centered by default. All right. Now, we've talked a little bit about these. I've actually shown you a couple examples, but these are CSS structural pseudo classes. Why is that even important? Well, notice what they're saying here. TH, first child, second child. All right, that's these two, of course. And then nth child 2. All right. And here we start first child, second child. Basically, it's from 0. But when you use nth child, it's 1, 2. So you're telling it this is the one that you want centered. Now, the only reason I'm mentioning this to you is notice what we're using in here. We're using first child, second child, etc., and nth child. They're called pseudo selectors because we're not exactly giving these things names. We could have gone in and taken, for example, that header if we wanted to, or, etc. And we could have given that a name and this a name. But by using the pseudo selector, what we're saying here with this one right here is we want everything that's inside of here, whether it's a header or whether it's data, we want it to be center aligned. All right. And again, it's called pseudo meaning false, because we're not really giving it a name. We're doing it positionally. All right. Okay. Then with the body in there, when you look, it has even. Okay. And when you look at that, you might say, wait a minute, it says even. Yeah. It's even from the start. All right. In the body, and that's here. So 1, 2, and we're telling you this is also known as zebra striping. All right. And we're saying that every other row, we want to have a background color of light yellow. And again, oftentimes you do things like this just for appearance sake. Now you might look at this, I do, and say, I don't really like the way the green and the yellow appear together. I might have made what's green here, I might have made that a dark yellow, for example, or something like that. But everybody's different as far as what they like. So as it says, these pseudo classes let you format a table without using class names or ID names. All right. In fact, we're not even using classes and IDs, period, in here. And you can use them on more than just parts of a table. You can use these pseudo classes all over the place. Many people like them. Many people dislike them. All right.
Quick question about
Sure.
like the nth child even that we were just talking about. Could
Yes.
you, instead of saying something like even, could you specify multiple numbers like 1,
I
comma,
don't
3?
believe so. I think it just
Okay.
takes even or odd.
Okay. All right. So you just have to make a separate
Right. Then what I would do would be
statement.
to make a separate class in that case and just apply them to those. In
Okay.
fact, what you're going to see when we get in a week or two, when we get into to Bootstrap, is I think it's going to be like we're going to just apply things. Like I think with to get striping in Bootstrap, I think you just say like table dash striped or something like that. All right. So again, it just depends. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Sure. Here, what they're doing is they're putting this inside of a figure. All right. I don't, this is me speaking. I don't see the advantage of doing this, except for the fact that it may make it a little bit easier when you are doing your adding your CSS. But I don't think I've ever seen a site that actually has a table inside of a figure. All right. I'm not saying it never happens. I'm saying I've never seen it. But they're saying here in this case, the figure element is a container. All right. All right. Merging cells in a row or column here. And again, some of this is what I mentioned to you before. Here is an example of row span. So you'll notice the word book is taking up 1, 2 rows. Sales is an example of col span, and you can say it's taking up 1, 2, 3, 4 different columns. All right. And all you're doing is you're adding row span, the words row span, or the word col span. All right. And as it says, col span identifies the number of columns to span, the default being 1, row span, the number of rows to span, meaning 1. Meaning if you don't use either one, they both take up 1 row and 1 column. All right. Again, with accessibility, and we started mentioning this before, you can add even more stuff in here. And again, I know that I keep harping at least at times on the same kind of thing, but I do want people to realize that the more accessible your website is to be. In other words, if I'm selling a service, and if that service is basically only going to be used by sighted people, for some reason, people who are blind would never use it. Nothing comes to mind. I don't know, but I'm sure there's something. Then this might not be as important. But I've said this kind of thing before, that if I'm selling a service and I've got a website in which I'm selling a service, I'm not going to be able to see the person who's buying the service. It's like, I don't see you. All right. That kind of an idea. I don't know if you've got some kind of a visual impairment or whatever. I mean, you could tell me, I could get a notice from, the main office if something like that was the case. But to try to take a table in this example and make it as accessible for people as possible. Remember, this is being explained to them. These are people who are visually impaired. So this is being explained to them, all right, by a sight reader. And sight readers have come a long way, all right, since they started. They used to sound like this. And now they basically have a very, very human-like speech pattern. But the more information that you can provide like this, the easier it's going to be, all right, as far as accessibility goes. I'm not going to read these to you. You can take a look at them yourself. All right. All right. Finally, the last thing that's discussed in here is making the site or the table responsive. So you can see what they've done here is they've taken the table itself, all right, and everything that's here, and they have basically set it up like this. Well, how are they doing that? Okay. What they're saying is they put in a media query. So they're saying that if it goes from 0 to 479 pixels, we want to display it block. All right, which is going to display it line over line over line, etc. All right. So to make it more responsive, you can make the table and column widths fluid and reformat it so it fits on smaller screens. As they mentioned there, one way to do this is to set it up so that each table cell starts on a new line, which is going to make it easier to read. All right, I think that's it. Yep, so that's it for tables. So if we, again, go back to our work here. So here you're going to be adding a table in the product list right here. And actually it's the whole thing. So it's 3 things here. So you'll notice product list. I don't know if that's it. I don't even want to read the specs. That could be a caption. That could just be here to begin with. All right. Then we've got category, we've got description, and we've got price. Okay. And under the category, you'll notice that we've got one category and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items under that category, each with its own description, each with its own price, and similarly with the costumes, the special effects, and the masks. All right. And then for the shape up, it's very similar as far as what you're doing, but it looks like it's a calorie counter. So this is going to be under healthy diets. All right. So with that said, let's jump into chapter 13 and start talking about forms. Now, maybe I did due diligence, maybe I didn't when I showed you this before, but I'm going to quick now. So I'm going to get rid of this whole table here. All right. And I'm going to put in something that's just going to be really, really simplistic. All right. And oops, I didn't want to do that. And I'm going to say here, it's going to be really, really simple. Well, we'll add to this as we go on. What is that? And let me get rid of this. And let me also wrap it. All right. And I'm going to leave it like, oh, that should work. And let's do this. We'll do a first name. We'll do a last name. And we'll do an email. All right, that's pretty simple. It's probably going to look really ugly, and that's totally fine. Okay, so we've got all that. Now, one thing we can do is we can magically, or if we, not so magically, but I can come in here, put in a BR tag right here, and let's see, put in a BR tag right here. You know what those do. There's nothing new here. All right. Now, it doesn't look very good. It's also, there's at 100%. It doesn't line up, etc. But what you can see here is the beginnings of a form. All right. So I probably want to come in, get rid of a couple of these things that are in here. All right. And I'd want to come in and at the start, before I do anything, maybe put in an H1 tag and says something like register here. All right. And then at the bottom of the, I probably want to put in something like, I don't know. Don't think I need to put anything else here either, but we'll find out right now. I might want to put a couple line breaks in here. All right. And those line breaks will replace those in a bit with some CSS, but just so you see it. All right. So there's a form. Now, does it look nice? No, but we can start making some changes to it in just a bit. Now, as we look at this, the first thing to notice is there's nothing in here. Everything that we do in this class in the first semester, everything in the AWD1000 class is done on what's known as the client side. All right. It's what we can see. Let's pretend for a moment that when we actually hit that submit button, that we wanted it to go out to a file on a server someplace and actually deal with the file. Then we would say something like this, like maybe we'd call it crummy name, but let's call it handle form.php. All right. We can also come in here and say, let's see, action equal, and say method equal. And there's two methods you typically use, and they are post and get. All right, I'm going to put post right here. We're going to go over all this in just a minute. Now, what you'll notice is if I do this, as I just showed you, it's not going to look a bit different, exactly the same. But now when I click submit, I'm going to get an error because it's looking for something called handle form.php. I haven't written that file. So where it says the page isn't working, it's letting us know, hey, it says there's a problem here. I'm trying to go to where you told me to go, which was handle form.php. I can't find it. All right. So the reason I took the time to do this is I wanted to show you a few things here. And you'll notice that everything is inside of form tags. All right. Forms have an action. If you don't want them to go anywhere, you either leave it blank, or what most people end up doing is they put a pound sign or hashtag in there, which means basically don't go anywhere. This method that's here, there's two things about it. I'm going to mention first the way we're going to look at it now and the way we're going to look at it a little bit later. All right. when you do a get, all right, so if this had said get in here, what's going to happen? In fact, let's do this. I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to run this. And I'm going to put information in. So I'll put in Jeff, Scott, and JP Scott at rankin.edu. Now, please watch up here in the line up here when I click submit. Now, might be a little hard to see, but it has here first name equals, after the HTML, it's got a question mark, first name equals Jeff, and last name equals Scott, and email equals jpscott %40 rankin.edu, and submit equals submit. Everything that's after the question mark that's up here is referred to as a query string. This is the information that got added. We used a get here, which means show the information right in the address bar. Now, what if I put another field in here? And I'm going to do that right now. So what if I put another field in here, and I'm going to just copy these. I'll copy this one down. In fact, let's do these two. All right, and I'm going to change that to one line break. There we go. And this one now is going to say password. And there actually is a password type. All right. All right, and now as you can see in here, when I run this, all right, so I'm going to come in and put the same stuff I put in there before. And for the email, I'll put in my email. For the password, I'm just going to put in hello 123. And you'll notice since I said it's a type password, what I'm typing in doesn't show. When I click submit, all right, it shows my password in here. Password equals hello 123. So usually when you use a get like this on the client side here, it's because you have information that if you send it along the wire here like this, you wouldn't mind other people seeing. Well, I don't want other people to be able to see the password. So if you don't want it to be set up like that, then instead of saying that your method equals get, you say your method equals post. The idea is when you go and provide information by hitting that submit button, if you use a get, everything appears as part of that query string that I showed you just a second ago. When you use post, rather than having it be part of the query string, what happens is when this information is sent, things called HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol headers are also sent. And the idea with a post is it's supposed to go and hide that information inside of those headers. Let's see if indeed that happens here. So I'm going to do a file save, and I'm going to run this again. So again, I'm going to put in exactly what I put in before. And I'm going to click submit. And what you'll notice now is it doesn't show that information here. It has all been sent, all right, but it's inside of what are referred to as the HTTP headers, all right? So what I'm telling you is in here, if you've got any kind of confidential information, social security numbers, passwords, maybe even salaries or whatever, all right, you'll use the method as post. Now, when we start working on this, and you're working on this in your second year of classes, the get and the post kind of take on a little different connotation. Typically, if you want a menu to show up on a screen. I'm not talking about doing anything, but you just want the menu to show up on a screen. That'll be a get. When you want the program to react, once you've hit a submit button, be a post. But I'm saying it's in the second semester because in the second semester, rather than looking at things from the client side, which is what we're doing now, you look at things from the server side. All right. Okay, so with that, I just wanted to give you that as an introduction. And I'll play with this one here and we'll make some changes to it as we go on. But let's go back into our book here. All right. So how to use forms and controls and the major types of fields that you would put onto a form are shown here. I'm not going to read any of them, but we'll go over them. That doesn't mean these are the only ones. There's at least a few other ones that you can use. All right. Not only that, virtually everything that's in here, because this is some of the new stuff, number, email, URL, and tell. Those are some of the newer ones. You've already learned in here that if I come in here and I want to know whether or not one of these works, I can go out to caniuse.com. And if I want to know if the tell works everywhere, I can type in tell here and hit enter. And you'll notice that older versions of a lot of this stuff, it's in red. You'll also notice for Opera Mini, it doesn't support it at all. All right. But if I would have looked at this a few years ago, there would have been a lot more red than what you see right now. Or you would have seen some green, which would mean basically limited support. All right. So as time has gone on, and again, you have to realize that now these are CSS, and some HTML5 and CSS3 things, that some of this stuff now is going on 20 to 25 years old. All right. So we're going to look at the major things you'd put in here, and I'm going to add some more onto our form. Then we'll talk about aligning and grouping. All right. And really, most of the stuff in here, is the HTML stuff. There is some automatic validation that you can do. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about some patterns. And then they'll show their web page. And then they'll show some of the even newer stuff that's in here. The search control, the file upload control, etc. All right. Not a real long chapter, not a particularly short chapter either. About 40 pages. So taking it from the top, I decided to show you a form that was a little bit more complex than the one that they showed. There's absolutely nothing wrong with theirs. So again, one thing I want to mention here, notice the word ID. You also saw that in here. It was not mandatory that you put in either one of these. You don't have to. Also, if I'm doing stuff on the client side, like we're doing right now, we're doing client side stuff, then technically the name equals is not needed. I like to show it to people from the get-go because when you're working on the client side, you use ID. When you're working on the server side, as you will next year, all right, that's when you use name. And they don't have to be given the same name. Normally, they are given the same name, but they don't have to be. All right. Okay. So one of the things that you'll notice when we get into it, I may have mentioned this already to you, but when we get into when we're working with JavaScript, and I'm just going to put a comment here so you see it, and that is we'll use something called get element by ID. So if we wanted to be able to grab, let's say, I don't know, the first name, it would be get element by ID, and it would be first name that we'd be using in there. All right. Okay. The action I already mentioned, as it says, is it typically is going to push you off to another file on a server someplace. All right. And that will handle what you put in. Now, we haven't even looked at this yet. We haven't even talked a lick about this yet. But one thing that's important with this is that if I click this, and let's assume for a second that there was a handleform.php file that was out on a server someplace. What you all want to do is, if all of these fields here are mandatory, let's say every one of these fields is mandatory, that right now, okay, if I click submit, it sent it. It didn't give me any error message. In fact, if I leave this off, or if I put in garbage here, it's still now, oh, we said type email. So we use some of the built-in validation. But if I do this and say, it takes it, all right, it took it. It had no problem with it. And if I leave this off, and if I leave this off, it still took it. All right. So why am I saying this to you? Because if all of these fields are required, that we must put in a first name, that we must put in a last name, that we must put in an email, that we must put in a password, we add the word required onto each one of them. All right. So I'm going to do that. You don't add it to the label, you add it to the field itself. There, so now I've got the word required on all of them. All right, so let me do a file, save all again, and let me jump back into where we were before and take a look at it. Now you'll notice that if I leave them blank, please fill out this field. You actually, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but you can actually, you just get a generic message, but you can change that message if you don't like it. All right, but again, now I get it for the next field. Now I get it for the next field. And again, I've got the stuff in here that says, please include an @ sign. So if I put in an @ sign, now it says it's still incomplete. It needs something, with a dot on the end. If I just put in that, dot is used in the wrong position. Didn't like that. Now it's okay. But password still says fill out this field. Now, as you'd probably guess, that when you set up emails and when you set up phone numbers and when you set up etc., some of these things have natural patterns associated with them. We're going to look at those in just a moment. But what I wanted to show you, and I think this is the right address, we're going to find out right now. There is something called HTML5 pattern.com. Please be the right one. Yes, it is. Good deal. So it says in here, postal codes, that would be like a zip code. So if you want to set it up for an American one, there it is. So I could even try it, and if I don't use the pattern correctly, it'll give me an error. Please match the requested format. If I put in 4 numbers, the same thing. 5 numbers, notice it matches it. If I put in a dash and I try it, no. But if I put in a dash with 4 more numbers, then it's okay. All right. And this is called HTML5pattern.com. And there isn't a lot in here, but it has, what I like it for are postal codes and phone numbers. All right. There's a thing in here for emails. Emails are so quirky that they say don't use a pattern for emails because they're so different. And if I actually go out, and I'm not going to right now, but I Google pattern validation emails, some of the ones it's going to give me, you're going to probably be surprised at how long they are. All right. Several hundred characters. Okay. So the method I already mentioned was get or post. The default is get, meaning if I don't put in a method, it defaults to get. All right. And I've shown you the difference between a get and a post. Get puts it in the query string, post does not. There's a few other differences between the two, all right? When you've got something in there as a get, it can be bookmarked, all right? So if you want to stick a bookmark in there, if it's a post, it cannot be bookmarked. If you use a get, I believe it's something like 4,000 characters you can use. When you use a post, I think it's almost unlimited for the number of characters you can use. Okay. Type. Going down here, you say we don't know, we haven't used that yet. Yes, we have. We said here, type equals text, meaning you can put in anything. But down here for the email, we said type equal email. All right. And down here, we said type equal password. All right. So there are different types that you can set up. All right. The ID I've already mentioned to you. Again, it can be referred to by client-side code. Name can be referred to, it says by client-side or server-side. It's exclusively server-side code. All right. If you want to disable a field, meaning that it'll show, but it'll be grayed out. So in other words, you won't be able to click on it or change it. You can make it disabled. All right. If you want it to be read-only, you can set it to read-only. Now, when you look at the example they have here, notice they gave the form an ID. I didn't do that. We could have. All right. And again, you might say that's fine. I mean, like, why would you even care? Well, let's just do this quickly. Let's come in here and for the entire form. All right. It doesn't matter if you put it here or in the middle, but I'll just do it here. I'll say ID equals my form. All right. And then let's go into styles. I don't know. Something like that. And then we'll go back into here, and I don't even know if I added this, but I probably didn't. So let's add our link. Oops. All right. And you'll notice that when we do that and you take a look at it now, where are you? There. No, yep, let's back up. Okay, that looks pretty ugly, but you can see we're starting to put a little styling in here, and by default it's black anyway, so this hasn't changed. All right, and you'll also notice that a form element is what's called a block element. So in other words, it's taking up 100% of the width, except for a little bit of margin that the browser puts in. All right. So again, I could come in if I wanted to. I could come in here and say for this, okay, so that's the form. I could say as an example width, let's make it about, I don't know, 40%. Now, when you look at it, looks a little bit nicer. I'm not saying it's perfect, but you get the idea. We could center it. We could do anything in the world we wanted to do to it. For now, because I don't want it to maybe run off the screen, tell you what, I'll make it like about, let's make it 70%. All right. It's going to take up more room than we need, but that'll work out fine. Because I want to show you some stuff they show in the book, and I don't do it that way. Although what they show in the book is totally fine. All right. So let's see. A form contains controls. When a form is submitted to the server, it is sent along with the HTTP request. Now, hopefully, I'm not going to go back, but hopefully you remember this from like chapter 1 of the book. We talked about HTTP. HTTP is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. When I go in here and I bring up a new address bar here, and I type in here rankin.edu like that, and I hit enter, I've just made an HTTP request. I've made a Hypertext Transfer Protocol request. What I get returned is a Hypertext Transfer Protocol response. So the user sends out a request, the server from the other side sends out a response. And again, this first semester, you are working with server side stuff. The third and fourth semester, you are working with, maybe I misspoke, so let me say it again. The first semester, you're working client side. You're basically putting stuff into forms or in an address bar or whatever. The second semester, the C# class, it's neither, because you're writing desktop applications. The third and fourth semesters, you are working from the server side. All right. All right. So let's talk about buttons. Okay. Now, notice in here, it says type of button, valid values equal submit, reset, button, or image. Let's take a look at another one of the ones that are in here. So let me come back to here. I'm going to copy this line for my button that's in here right now. And I'm going to change this to reset. And the ID will be reset. And this will be reset. Okay. So I've added another button, but the type is reset. I don't know if it's going to say reset. It might say clear all. I don't remember what it says. It does say reset. What reset does, kind of what you probably think, is it sets everything back to its default values. Okay? That's exactly what its job is. All right, so that's two of them. Sometimes when you are setting this stuff up, you've got a button that when you click it, you want something to happen, and that something that you want to have happen isn't submitting something, isn't resetting it. All right. So you make that a type button. Now I'm going to give you an example, but it's a stupid example. All right. But it just popped in my head, so it's the one I'm going to use. So I'm going to grab another one of these, and I'm going to say not input type equals. All right. But I'm going to say button. And I'm going to say ID equals change color. Name equals change color. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to say change color, and I have to end my button. Now, this isn't going to do anything because we haven't talked about JavaScript yet. All right. But as an example, what I could do then with this, what I could do is I could set it up so that every time I click that button, let's just say the background color of the form, I could make it change. All right. I mean, that's a silly example, but what I'm trying to show you is submit is designed to go and send something off from the client to the server. All right. That's really what's making your HTTP response in this case. The reset is designed to set everything back to its default. The change here, the change is designed to, I mean, in this case, to change the color, but a regular button is designed to be able to do something programmatically. All right. And the other one that was shown there was an image button. All right. And that's something like this. In fact, sometimes today, for like a shopping cart, if it's a button, you won't even see any words anymore. They'll just be a picture of a shopping cart. Okay. So you've got those. Value, as it says, it's the value displayed on the button. Okay. So what that means is, I think I could have also done this. We're going to try it at least, where I put change color right here. All right. Let me do this. And I'm going to come in here and say value equal, and I'm going to put change color like that. And it should look the same, I believe. Nope, it did not. So it did not like that. Here it needed to be on the outside, the change color. All right, but let's grab this value equal that we've got right here, and let's use it for the reset. All right, and I'm going to change this to from change, not change color, but instead of having it say reset, I'm going to have it see if we put in here clear form, if it takes that. Right? Clear form. So that's how you use the value. Okay. What do we got left? Height and width. Hopefully those just make sense. All right. You can go in and set an alt in here, which basically comes up with kind of a tooltip. All right. If you want to do that. All right. Everything else in here, I think we've gone over already on how to use text fields and text areas. Well, I've already shown you how to use text fields. Okay. Those are type equal text. We also looked already at the type equal password. Now notice there's a hidden in here. This is kind of neat right there. A hidden one, a hidden field is not shown on the form. All right. So why would you ever want to have something that's hidden? Imagine for a second that, I don't know, let's say that I work for Pizza Hut. And if somebody goes online to order, okay, and they order, I don't know, a large sausage pizza, all right, it's going to give them a price. Then it's also going to give them a taxable amount. So it'll be a subtotal, a taxable amount, and then a final total. Well, there's really no reason to show what the tax rate is, but it's needed in the calculation. So that's put in there as a hidden field. All right. Now, hidden fields are kind of special in that. So if I come in here and I do this, all right, and I know this, it doesn't really have any meaning here, but I'm going to just put this in anyway. I'm going to put a BR tag right here. All right. And I'm going to put an input, but I'm going to say type equals, hidden. All right. And ID equals hidden, and name equals hidden. Now, if I give it a value, it's going to show. Okay, it's going to show. All right, I believe. Let's see. So I'm going to put it here. Value equals hidden. Maybe it won't. I could be wrong. So, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. No biggie. All right. No, it's not showing. However, if I right mouse click on here and I choose view page source, it still shows. So hidden fields are hidden from an external user by default, but they're not actually hidden in terms of they are in the HTML itself. All right. And max length is just how long do you want to make this? All right. And we can set that up. Okay. And if we wanted to, it's not that big a thing. Autofocus tells the browser to focus on the field. Well, we could set this up, and it usually will work like this anyway, but let's come in here and say, when we start, our first field is first name. So I'm going to type in here autofocus, just like that. All right, and I'm going to save this. All right, then I'm going to come back to here, and I'm going to bring this up again, not there, close that right here. And I'm going to refresh, and notice where my cursor is. All right, now I believe that if I remove that, so if I remove the word autofocus from there, all right, and I save it, and I run it again, and I refresh, notice it's not there. I have to click in it. So you can make it a little nicer for the end user by setting the autofocus. Now, those of you like you, Grant, that were in the C# class last semester, what you'll see a little bit later is there's also a tab index that you can set. So I can set it up so this could be 0, 1, 2, 3, so that if I just come in here and I keep tabbing, now it's put it in the right order, and that's just because that's the order in which I put these in. But if you want to make sure it's in the order you want, you can specify a tab index as well. All right, this is all stuff that you're going to see still in the chapter. All right. So the three most common types of fields are text fields, password, and hidden. Let's quickly look at text area, then we're going to take our second break. All right, so I'm going to come in here, and normally when you set up a text area, all right, so I'm going to come in here, and before these buttons, okay, right here, I'm just going to have one line break, and I'm going to put in a text area. And you put in width equals, and that's how wide you want it to be. And I'll put in 25, and cols equal how many columns you want it to hold. And I'm going to say 15. All right. And then I'm going to say in here in this text area, now typically I'd give it a label so people would have some kind of an idea what the heck it is we're asking about. Oops. All right. And I'll put in here comments. All right. And like that. And I'll have this say comments. And let's save this. And there it is. You say it's not the same thing, but well, we really should have made it higher than we did. So let's see. For cols, well, I guess that would be rows. For rows right now, I only made it a certain size. Okay. In fact, I think we set this thing to be what 70% or whatever earlier. Let me remove that we had set earlier. So let's get rid of that width. Now let's take a look at this. That still isn't very big. So let's see what we put in there for that. All right, so width, let's make it 50 and 50. And you should notice a fairly big change then once we do that. Okay, so there we go. All right. I don't know why the rows doesn't look like it's working, but I'm not worried about that right now. All right, we're just building this out. One last thing, because I forgot to say it, and that is that you can use what are called placeholders. All right. What some people do today is they don't like using labels. All right. Instead of labels, they use placeholders. Let's quickly look at what those are. So I'm going to put in each one of these. I'm going to put in a placeholder, which I better spell right. So placeholder equals enter first name. I'll just put in a couple of them. So we'll put in enter first name here, and we'll put in enter last name here. I mean, you get the idea, I think, if you see a couple of these. All right. And I'm going to save this. You can put them into every label. You could even do it for a password, etc. You can do all of that stuff if you're so inclined. So now notice we get this. Now, this isn't real text. You may or may not be able to tell, but it's grayed. As soon as you come in here and you click and you start putting in something, that text disappears. And if there's nothing in there, it reappears. So what some people like to do today is they don't like to use labels. They use only placeholder text. Some people like that. Some people find that doing it that way is a little bit confusing, so they don't use it. All right. Okay, so we've got a good start on this. But before we jump into radio buttons, checkboxes, and labels, It is 10:15, so let's come back, please, at 10:25. All right, I'm hoping you're back. I thought we said we'd start at 10:25. So let's first, taking a look at this form, it looks pretty darn ugly right now. So let's change a couple things on it, see if we can make it look a little bit nicer. All right. So first of all, it is at, there it is at 100%. All right. So I'm going to make it a little bigger than that, but I'm going to try to change it around a little so we can make it look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to add some homemade CSS here. So let's see. Let's go in and we'll start by saying, let's look at labels. And we will want labels. Let's give them a width of 200 pixels. And then let's do a text align right. And then let's do a font weight of bold. Okay, let's see if that did anything. All right. Well, didn't do what I thought it would do here, but looks a little bit nicer. So let's go back and look at that. So I've got width 200 pixels. Thought that was the way I wanted it. Try 300, but I don't, that look sounds really exorbitant. Well, that didn't change at all. So we'll hit that in a little bit. What they actually did in the book, I believe, is they said to float these to the left. I believe. So let's look at that. All right, still isn't really working the way I wanted to, but we'll get it to work. I'm not worried about that. And I'm going to put it back to width of 200 pixels. All right, and I'm going to say for this is done a little bit weird, but it looks like this. I believe it's input type equals text. I think it's like this. I think that's how we do it. It doesn't like that though. So let's see. Well, we'll find it. All right. I wanted to put some bottom margin on there. So shame on me for trying to go outside of the box. But let's take a look. And I'm going to use the examples that they have right from the book. All right. And I'm going to change around the verbiage, but I'm going to grab these. So I'm going to grab, oh, it's not going to let me do that. So let's just do it like this. All right. See, we have a label. Okay, input. Let me do it like this. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in here an H2, and I'm just going to have it say gender. In fact, it probably would be better like they did it with nothing at all in there. So we'll just say gender. And we'll put a line break in after it. Okay. So how do they have this set up? Oh, they did it like that. Okay, so they've got, all right. I wouldn't have done it like this, but I'm going to try to keep in tune with the way they show it in the book. All right, so I'm going to put that in 3 times. Right. spelled that wrong. Only one checkbox can be checked at a time, so it doesn't make sense to set check for all of them. For this one, we'll put down other. All right, so I'm going to grab all of that code and I'm going to place it inside of here. And we'll put that right before our buttons. So after the text area here, I'll put it in there like that, and I'll put another BR tag here and move these over. All right, let's take a look at that. All right, don't know how it let me check two of them. It really typically doesn't do that, but that's okay. But these are right here, these buttons. Let me get rid of that checked for the other one. All right, radio buttons, if you've never heard the term, are based off of the old types of cars people used to have that had a push button radio in them. All right. In other words, you could program 3, 5, whatever it was, stations on your car's radio, and you'd push a button and then that particular one would come on. All right. So let's see, what did I do here? Yeah, I got rid of the check. Good. But the idea behind these is if you check one and it's not working right now, I think I know why, but the other ones would become unchecked. So the problem right now is these are three distinct radio buttons. They're not part of a radio button group, which means probably I did something wrong. So let's go back and take a quick look. All right, notice the name. That was what I should have kept the same. All right, up here it says crust, and then it says name is crust, name is crust, name is crust. So what I should have done here for name on these is I should have said gender. Like that. Now, what should happen is every time I check one of the buttons, all right, only one should be checked. There you see it. So radio buttons are for what are known as being used for mutually exclusive choices. In other words, and I'm trying to be politically correct here, which is why I put the other in. Okay. But quite often you'll see radio buttons, and there will be one for gender, and it will say male, female, or female, male. Also, you may or may not have noticed this, but if I do come in here and add my stuff, and I click clear form, it'll go back to female because that's the one I said as checked. All right. On the other hand, when I go through and do this, sometimes you've got things that you don't want to be mutually exclusive. All right. In other words, what if I asked in here, I don't know what they used in the book, but what if I asked, what if this was something where I was trying to hire people? All right. And what if I asked in here, well, look at their example. You could get any one of these three kinds of pizzas. You could add pepperoni and or mushrooms and or black olives. So when you've got something that you've got choices that are not mutually exclusive, they're not mutually exclusive, you put them then, instead of putting them in radio buttons, you put them in checkboxes. All right. So let's go in and see if we can add one of those. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go over to here, the one that we just did, and I'm going to copy it and then just make a bunch of changes to it. All right. So I'm going to come in here and copy that. And here where we have gender, I'm going to put desired shift. All right. And I'll start by making all these check boxes. All right. And this one I'll just call first. All right. And that'll be the label for first. And it'll say, whoops, first shift. All right. And we'll do the same thing for the other ones. All right. In other words, this will say second, as will this. I don't really think I need a value in here, but it's not hurting anything. All right. And then this last one that I did not change. This one should say third. And we'll add the word shift here. All right, let's see if I did that right or incorrectly. Okay, so we've got that, and I did make it checked. Typically with check boxes, you have none of them checked. All right, but you can see I'm starting to create a form here. All right, and again, setting that thing back to 100%. All right, it looks like this. Okay. So as far as what's in here, we have shown radio buttons and check boxes. The type, as it says, is either radio or checkbox. The name, as it says, is a way you can refer to it. This is one time you can refer to that name with the client side. That's why the name for the radio buttons had to be the same. All right. The value, as it says, the value to submit to the server. What is that? What the heck does that even mean? All right. Well, I don't want to show you it now, but I'm going to show you it in just a moment exactly what that means. Okay, if you just bear with me for a minute. All right. The accessibility guidelines, as it says, use radio buttons and check boxes with a label. Yeah. Use only one radio button in a group can be selected at a time, but as many check boxes as you want. And one thing I have not shown you on here that I'd like to show you right now, and that is, remember we got that thing that said 4 equals for every label. If I click on any of the labels, watch what happens. All right, I make the field active. So if somebody clicks on here instead of in here, it does the same thing. All right, is that mandatory? Of course not. All right, but it just made it a little nicer. All right, I'm going to come in here and make a couple more changes so we can go on. And that is, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to remove the comments thing that we put in. You'll see why in a moment. But I'm going to remove the comments thing. All right. And I'm going to add a couple more things in here. So let's see. I'm going to grab, I want the one that says type equal text. So I'm going to grab this and I'll grab this. Just like that. So I've got name, first name, last name, and I'm going to put in here address. There's a reason I'm doing this. It's not to waste my time or yours. Okay, and I'm going to put in, whoops, I'm going to put in here. Next, I'm going to put in city. And the reason I'm going through all this trouble is I don't want state to be done the same way. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. All right, let's see if it's looking the way I want it to look right now. All right, so we got first name, last name, address. I got an extra one here. I'll remove that, but city. Good. All right, let's first remove that and then we'll fix that. So I don't know where that is right now, but we'll find it. All right. In just a moment, we're going to go look at the state, and that's going to change things a little bit. What do I mean by that? Well, for that, we're going to use a drop-down list. And again, it is much easier for me to show this to you. All right. And I'm going to do something like this right now. All right. So there's 50 states. If you include Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, you could even say 52. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do this. I'm going to not Google, but just search in here for HTML um, select list with all 50 states. Okay. HTML select list of states. All right. So I'm going to grab every bit of this, just like this. Now this is making my HTML really big. All right. But I'm going to paste that in. I don't care about how, if it looks like it's not formatted terribly. All right. But let's do a save all on here. And now let's go back and look in here. So now notice I needed to have a line break there, but select a state. And there's our states. All right. So we get a nice drop down list. Now, if I wanted to, rather than having it say select a state, let's say I was doing some kind of a form for Rankin Technical College. I may want to, because most of our students come from Missouri, I may want to default it to Missouri. And I could do that too if I wanted to. All right. So let me just go in and right at the end of this, let me add a line break so it looks a little bit nicer. And let's talk about what's in here. All right. So this is a select list. You'll notice that the name and the ID are the same thing. Now, notice what comes next after option. It says value. If I am passing this information, let's say internally to the system, to a database, and if you don't know what a database is, don't worry about it. All right. This is what shows to the user the name of the state. This is what gets passed. So if you've ever filled out a form, you might have put Missouri in for your state, or you might have put Mo in for your state. All right. But let's say somebody is entering that information into a computer. All right. They would be entering AL in there rather than Alabama. So this is a select, also known as a drop-down list. All right. You surround it with select tags. All right. And there, it's not really the label in this case, but we do give it a name and an ID in this case. And then in there, you've got options. And notice it says selected equals selected. I don't even think you need this anymore. I think you can just say selected. I think that suffices for today. We're going to check in a minute. But this is going to be the default value. It says select the state. All right. you'll notice again, if I change this selected here, if I do move it, and I move it down here to Missouri, and I put it in like that, and I save this, and I bring this up again, now it has Missouri in there, and I in that said state. I'll put that in a minute. All right. Let's do that right now so it looks kind of like everything else does. All right. So again, kind of an awkward looking form right now, but we're at least going through the major components that are in here. Now with a list box, you show everything at once. So typically it is not, you wouldn't put that in for states because it would take too much room to show 50 states on the screen. But you'll notice, all right, that for a list box, it looks pretty much the same. All right. But it got a size in here of 4. So that's the maximum number of things that you can put in here. All right. As it says here, drop-down lists and list boxes allow you to select items. If the list box contains more items that can be displayed at one time, a scroll bar is added. You saw that with the states. You can use the option element to define options in a drop-down list or a list box. You can also set it so that in here you can have multiple options if you want. All right. All right, next are the phone number, the email, which I've shown you already, and the phone number is done with a tel. So let's bring in that one. So we've got city, and then we had state, but before city, oh, we got name, first name, last name. I don't know if we lost the email or if it's down here. I think it's down here. There we go. So after the email, let's add the phone number. All right, so a label for, we'll just put phone. Put that here as well. This will be type tel, and this will be phone, and this will be phone. And you'll notice if you look in here, all right, if you look in here, you'll notice I've got every field as being required. I have to do that. All right, meaning you, as the person writing the program, you can decide what fields are going to be mandatory and which are going to be optional. For instance, right now, if the person did not have an email address, what are they supposed to do? All right. But there's the phone. So you'll notice if I come in here and if I start typing in incorrect stuff and I attempt to submit it, well, again, these are all mandatory, but let me come in here and just there and submit. All right. Well, it does look like it took it. Okay. But what tel is actually designed to do is to work with mobile devices. You've probably seen something like this where, let's say again, it's Pizza Hut, let's say, as I used before, and you come in there and you can set it up so that when you give a phone number, there'll be like a button on your phone where you can press it to automatically call. So let's take a look at what the book says here about tel. All right. With a number field first, okay, this is a very different type of field. All right. It only allows you to put in numbers, and that's a good thing. So if I said like salary requirements or something, you could do that. You can also set minimums and maximums. That said, the minimums and maximums, you can still put a bigger number in there if you put it in manually. All right. And if you don't understand what I mean, don't worry about it. It's totally fine. But when we look in here, right, there's the number. It automatically steps by 1, but if you didn't want it to step by 1, you could put in another number. So here's number right here, investment. Notice the minimum it's expecting is 100 in there. The maximum is 1,000. And in here, each time you click this, it's going to go up by or step by 100. All right. So what else do we have? The email we've already talked about. The URL, you can set that up. With the URL, it basically wants at the beginning either HTTP or HTTPS, and then a /www dot. So if you want people to be forced to put in an entire email address, okay? There's date and time controls. So for instance, if I put in here, let's just say it was some medical thing, and I wanted to know the day that you were born or whatever, you can do this. And this actually is bringing in here a date. This is called a date picker. Maybe you've seen this kind of thing if you've ever tried to make an appointment for a doctor's office or something like that. All right. All right. Aligning controls. Let's look at that. Well, this is how they did it in here. Okay, they said all labels floated to the left and given a certain width and text align right. Well, let's look at that. All right, because I thought that the way I did it would be just fine, but for whatever reason, it didn't like it. So float, width, and text align. So let's do all those. We've got width. Okay, we've got text align. We've got that for the bold and float left. All right. Oh, we brought that spreadsheet or that in here. Let's make sure we did. Yep, there it is. All right, you can see what we've done now by floating them. All right, these things are not put in as labels, and that's why they look funky right there. But you can see already it's starting to look a lot better. All right, and I'd have to find out again where that is. It's right before city, so there's someplace in there I've got an extra greater than. And if I did come in here and just made these labels, all right, so where I've got the other stuff in here, so where I put in these two, just make that a label. All right. And make this one a label. It'll be looking better. It still isn't perfect. All right, so everything looks pretty good there, except again, right after the address or right before the city. Somewhere in there. Oh, I think I've got this line in here twice. That might be what it is. So let's look. All right, now it's coming together. Again, it doesn't look great. All right. But it is demonstrating the stuff that we've talked about in here as well. All right. Now, it's because I made this really wide in here too. So let's go back and let's see. What if we made this instead of 200 pixels, we made that 100 pixels? Is that going to look better? All right. Now it's looking a little better. All right. We might want to come in here and put some padding in here, some margin in here, etc. So let's just do that. Let's just put in we'll put in both. So I'm going to put in here padding, just 5 pixels, and margin, same thing, 5 pixels. All right. Oh, that's going to look really terrible. And I think it's because of the padding. All right. No, still looks terrible. That's not a problem. There we go. Okay, let's keep going on then. If a form includes a series of controls and labels, you can align them by floating them. Well, that's what you just saw. All right. Now, grouping, this is kind of a neat thing, or not, depending on your point of view. All right. So let's change this, and we'll put in one of these. All right. And to do this, you use what's called a field set and a legend. All right. So there's the legend right there and right there. All right. And there's the field set around them. So let's put one, we'll put a couple of these in here. All right. So let's see. Where we put all this stuff down here below with a gender and whatever. Put the beginning of the legend there. And the end of the legend will go here. Oops. All right, and we'll add another legend right here. That it'll begin there. And we will end it here. All right, let's tab these over so they look a little bit nicer. And same with this. All right, now where I've got label right here, all right, I'm going to change that. I'm going to get rid of the label where it says that. I'm going to put here, unless I did it backwards. Let's double check. Okay, where I put label, it should say field set, and this should say legend. I thought that looked funky. So let's make this a legend. Here and here. All right. And this will become a field set. And that's going to have to go on the end. All right. Sorry about that. All right. And this will say legend now. All right. So if we take a look. All right. Well, that one worked. And then so we'll fix that one. But you'll notice everything that's in here is now inside of the box. The gender got screwed up, so we'll have to fix that. All right. I could have taken the personal information and done the same thing up here. Let's do that, and then let's fix this one. So for some reason I've got my ending field set there, and that's what goofed that up. So we'll fix that. This was the password, etc. So let's come in here and we'll put an ending field set. And then we'll put a beginning field set up here. There we got field set. That should just say form and not field set. So we'll put the field set right here. And then underneath that, we'll put a legend. And it will say personal info. All right, that field set should still be ending right there. Right there, not form, but field set. All right, see if I made it better or worse. All right, now we've got boxes around everything. Those boxes are pretty big. Okay, so we could change it if we wanted to. I don't know what's going on there, but again, this is still funky, but we can fix that. Hopefully what you're saying is there's a little bit of substance to this form. In other words, the way it looks. And again, if I knock it back down to 100% like this. Now, the changes I'd like to make. All right, I want to change this because that gender, again, is still screwed up. I have to fix that. But this looks the way it should look. This looks the way it should look. All right. Now, what can I change? Well, let's come back in here. And let's do a little bit of styling. So how about field set? I should be able to come in here and do a margin bottom of 10 pixels. That shouldn't disrupt anything. All right. So let me do a save all on that. Go back to here, and where the gender is, it still is funky. Okay. There's the beginning field set. Legend, gender. Isn't that the same way I did it here? Well, I've got a line break, but other than that, still looks weird, but I'll have to fix that. But the other thing we could do is, well, it's taking up a lot of room. We could change the color of it, but let's just, for now, let's just change the width, because that'll make it look a lot better, I believe. If we say width 50%. Okay. There we go. All right. And again, I'll fix that. I'll put this all out there at the end of the period today. I don't know why anybody wanted, but if you do. All right. All right. Tab order. In fact, let's see what we've got left here. So on 438. Wow. This is, I guess it's a longer chapter than I thought it was. And I had said that I would only go till no later than 11 today. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to literally stop it right here. All right. And I'm going to pick it up tomorrow. I'll fix this form up and then I'll put that out there. But I think we left it was 438. Yes. So we'll pick it up tomorrow talking about tab order and assigning access. I will pretty this up a little bit and I will take this entire form and I will put it out on into a GitHub repo. Okay, it's called junk now, but I'll change that to like form example. All right. Thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully you're still there, Grant. But I will talk to you tomorrow. We'll finish this up, and it won't take much time to do 14 and 15 tomorrow. We should be done tomorrow by 10 o'clock. Okay, I'll talk to you then.
All right, sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.